Welcome back to another review. This time around, we've got some freshly revealed rogue cards, at least officially revealed. We got a sneak peek of a lot of these in the Death Knight show match, but we got all the final details here. And we got some new Demon Hunter cards, we got some catch-up Druid cards, but for now, let's kick it off with Potion Master Putricide, the 2-mana 1/4. He is an undead, and he reads, after a minion dies, add a concoction to your hand. Well, what the heck is a concoction? Well, it's these, and my apologies for the low quality images here if I didn't find some higher quality ones by the time this goes live. We'll see if I edit those in later or not, but I'm gonna add a little insert here because I'm not sure I explained this quite well enough. I forgot, although we did see these earlier and a lot of people talked about them, maybe not everybody has. So the way concoctions work is they can fuse together 2 at a time, but only 2 at a time. So if you get a slimy concoction in hand that's summoning a random 3-cost minion, the next concoction you get, say it's the Babbling Concoction, that will fuse together, and then you'll have a card for 3 mana that says deal 3 damage and summon a random 3-cost minion. The third concoction you get will not fuse in. They only fuse 2 at a time. So that will start a new mix, basically. And then the fourth one you get would fuse with the third concoction. Then you'd have 2 mixed upgraded concoctions in hand. So importantly, they just fuse together 2 at a time. And then there's, of course, 25 combinations possible because you got 5 concoctions here that can mix with 5 concoctions, including themselves. So a lot of pretty crazy cards to consider and a lot of fun combinations for sure. The 5 base effects are summon a random 3-cost minion, deal 3 damage, add a card to your hand from another class, it costs 3 less, destroy a random enemy minion, and draw 2 cards. So some of those are just like a Deadly Shot or an Arcane Intellect, right? But what that means is anytime you get 2 of these, that suddenly becomes summon a random 3-cost minion and deal 3 damage, right? Suddenly you're talking about, okay, maybe it's more like a Flanking Strike, for instance, or you could get 2 of the Gleaming Concoctions and you could just straight up draw 4 cards for 3 mana, right? That's a sprint for 3 mana. So once you start combining these, you're netting essentially a mana discount per effect, and some of these become pretty nuts. You could get 2 of the 3 damage together and it will deal 3 damage twice. That's 6 damage, or a Fireball for 3 mana. Or you could get, you know, a Hazy Concoction and a Gleaming Concoction. You could draw 2 cards and add a card to your hand from another class that costs 3 less. So like a big value generator, basically getting a couple of your own cards and then a bonus discounted card as well, which obviously those discounts could make that pretty nuts. So all in all, you know, the base versions of these are often weak cards. You wouldn't be super excited to play most of these at a base version. I mean, you know, draw 2 cards is probably fine sometimes. But once you start fusing them together, the potential becomes actually pretty scary. They all actually look like really strong cards when they are fused together in hand, when they just mix. So what that means is with, you know, a handful of cards here that are different ways to make concoctions or cheat them out, suddenly you both get a lot of extra value, and some of these are pretty high tempo cards as well. So for Putricide himself, he's going to proc and give you a concoction after a minion dies. Now do note, that's not friendly minion, so you can play this with, say, some removal cards. You know, play this with a couple serrated bone spikes, clean up your opponent's stuff, get a couple concoctions. Maybe you have a couple small things left over. Maybe you're even playing some little token cards or something. I don't know, some rams. And you just run those in as 1/1 rushers in order to generate extra concoctions. You can see a lot of scenarios where you're getting, you know, 2, 3, 4 concoctions out of a Putricide's not absolutely crazy. And then it also becomes, you know, the sort of must-kill target for your opponent. They need to be really careful if this snowballs into even additional value. So that said, he's conditional. He's not always going to be great. There will be board states and hand states where you just don't really have the things you need necessarily to get the concoction engine running off of Putricide. There just aren't good targets, aren't good minions to trade in. So a little bit risk to sit in hand for a while. And then, of course, it takes a while maybe to get a good moment for your concoctions to get played as well. There's just some extra mana commitment there. But still a lot of potential to make a lot of stuff and create some pretty big turns. I think that'll often happen a little bit more in the mid game, but that's probably not a risk because the concoction's at 3 mana. It's not like you're playing this on turn 2 and expecting to get some concoctions going super early. Concoctions are going to feel best when you have more spare mana, have ways to weave them into your turns. playing them on turns 5, 6, 7, etc., I think is where they'll really have their power band. So saving a Putricide for, you know, a turn 5 or turn 6 setup, I don't think will feel like a huge sacrifice. I'm pretty sure that's where you're going to want to be working with concoctions anyway, and you've got some other cards to get things rolling a little bit faster, saving Putricide for later, basically. So moving on to the Concoctor, a new 1-mana 1/2 battlecry, add a random concoction to your hand. And yeah, what's not to love about this? A 1-mana card, number 1, is great for Rogue. They love little stuff like this, just weaving it into turns, setting up combos and so on. And this is giving you a pretty big potential value piece back, generating a really nice card. Concoctions are going to be strong, especially once they start automatically fusing together in hand. That's gonna create some power plays, and this is a great little tool to do that. You could even shadow step this guy, get some concoctions rolling, ready for a big like turn 3 swing play off the back of this if you wanted to. So I think this just looks amazing. Like, this is everything that Rogue wants, and the concoctions are a really nice payoff for it. So Concoctor is a funny name to me, but I think this card looks really good. So next up here is the Ghoulish Alchemist, a 2-mana 3/2 undead battlecry. Your next concoction costs 0. So actually, yeah, that's nice. I mean, the concoctions are already probably pretty good on average at 3 mana, especially when fused. And this guy making them cost 0, that's a crazy swing potential, right? And frankly, you could play Concoctor on 1, play the Ghoulish Alchemist on 2, use him to summon like a random 3-drop, even if your concoction has not been fused together yet. Who cares, man? That's still a really nice swing. You get 3 bodies by turn 2. That could be a very powerful opener. And then, of course, as you start to get better concoctions that fuse together, things go even better for you. So yeah, just a little way to cheat out a 3/2 and kind of save a mana for your concoctions as well. Frankly, you could even maybe kind of see this in some of the miracle-y stuff. I've got these cards weaving all together. I got concoctions coming down for 0. I got card draw. I got discounts. Like, okay, suddenly, you know, maybe you start fusing packages together even. Does this tie some of Rogue's other successful packages in? Quite possibly. Next up here is the Vile Apothecary. I think this is probably my least favorite of the concoction cards. This is a 3-mana 2/4 undead. At the end of your turn, add a random concoction to your hand. So this one is both a little bit more expensive to get your concoction than all the other ones, so you have that 3-mana overhead right off the bat. You know, it theoretically can go off multiple times if it sticks around on board, but I don't think it really has the level of survivability required for that. 2/4s by turn 3 aren't super hard for most people to deal with, and I think this will feel like a pretty high priority target, which, you know, sometimes that's an advantage, but in this case, it's not like your opponent's going out of the way to do something crazy to kill this. It's just an easy little chip up at a 2/4 health total. If this was a 2/5, then I think you'd have a lot more snowball potential off of it. But as a 2/4, it feels just a little bit easier to deal with. So I think you're usually only going to get 1 concoction out of this. Is that still going to be worth it for a concoction deck? It might be. You might just need to hit that threshold where you're getting enough concoctions rolling, and you just kind of need everything you can get to get enough. But I wouldn't be totally shocked if there were some concoction lists that still cut Vile Apothecary and just chose other higher tempo Rogue stuff to complement the other faster concoction plays, whereas this one might feel a little bit slower. So finally for Rogue here, we have Potion Belt. This is a new 2-mana spell that allows you to discover 2 concoctions. So this one in particular is really cool because if you play this on turn 2, you get to pick 2 concoctions, and you know there's 5 options. So each one you discover, you're going to see 3 of the 5. You get pretty good odds of hitting exactly what you want. And in particular, you could hit some really high tempo stuff to play on turn 3 on curve for that 3-mana concoction. So you could get if you're looking, you know, for a bunch of card draw, you could do that, sure, but you might just like take a swing, deal 3 and summon a 3-drop, or maybe just summon 2 3-drops if that's what's fitting the game plan best. But having that luxury to decide exactly what you're going to fuse into, assuming you haven't already made 1 concoction, but even then you'll know which one you're getting first to fuse in, so you can still make some choices there. But very often this is just going to be pick your concoction and make something that's perfect for the moment, and I think that's going to make this really nice, especially when played on curve, but also totally fine late in the game too. Just a way to get some value generation, some reload, whatever you might need off of it. It allows you the control to probably find what you're looking for. Maybe you just need the 6 burst damage. Boom, Potion Belt's your answer. So I think this card gives a lot of control to the player and has a lot of upside in building your own concoction. Very rarely will I think this like totally whiff where you're completely disappointed by the choices that you get. So I think this looks really good. Moving over to Demon Hunter, we have a couple random cards here. The Brutal Annihilin, a 9-mana 9/9 demon with Taunt and Rush, and after this minion survives damage, that's important, deal that amount to the enemy hero. So if you play this and you run it into an 8/8, of course it will survive that 8 damage and then deal 8 damage to the opponent's face. So outside of any like health buffs or manipulations there, 8 damage is basically the max here that Brutal Annihilin is going to be able to offer, which of course that's kind of like, again, a spin on a King Crush almost. We've already had Demon Hunter living in that space with King Rush, as some people called the Illidari Inquisitor fellow in the past. But this is more like fringe big demon support. Demon Hunter's had this thread running in the background for multiple sets now, and it's never quite gotten there. There's been some really off meta stuff that's tried to work with it. I do think this has some intriguing aspects with cards like Proving Grounds, where you're summoning 2 of your minions and they're fighting, because this taking damage then can actually be almost a little bit of an asset, whereas in the past with Proving Grounds, sometimes that was a real liability. If you're running 2 of these, that's a hair bit risky, because if they do kill each other, they will do 0 damage because they didn't survive. But if it's like running into an 8/8 or something with a Death Rattle, you know, maybe that could be a way to take a fairly big swing, leave a 9/1 behind on board with Rush, right? So there are some angles for this one again, but we're really running out of time. The door's about to close on all of this big Demon Hunter stuff, because of a lot of it's going to be rotating in the new year in April presumably, and I don't know if that's going to have time to get there. It feels like this is just really kind of the background deck for for Demon Hunter, and I don't know if this big demon stuff is ever going to be compelling enough. It just seems like the minion quality is not quite there, and the way to cheat them out is not quite fast enough. So between the two, even though Brutal Annihilin looks like a pretty good demon, I still think it'll fall short. So next up here, we also got a new spell for Demon Hunter, Unleash Fell, a new 1-mana Fell spell. This one deals 1 damage to all enemies. So this is a really cheap version of some other cards we've seen like this in the past. It also has Mana Thirst 4. It's going to give the card a life steal. So at a base level, this is a little bit of an AoE, and then also potentially a nice heal. It's kind of got those city tax vibes for Paladin, but it goes face, notably, which I actually think makes this card pretty dang intriguing because of things like spell damage. This could be both a really nice board clear with a little bit of spell damage, where it's like, man, if you get this +2 spell damage, Talented Arcanist or whatever, right? This is dealing 3? That's suddenly really nice. It could be like a full heal almost, you know, if you're hitting enough minions and a nice board clear and some chip damage. And then if you're replaying that with Jace in particular, this works great with Jace because it works, right? It doesn't have to have any targeting risks or anything. It's just going to be a little bit more chip damage, and a couple of these might help you stabilize through a board a little bit. So yeah, this just looks like a better version of other playable cards. Not every Demon Hunter is going to need this, of course, because the output's not that high. Ultimately, it's still just single point of damage without support or without help. But I could easily envision a deck running enough Fell stuff where this just kind of fits in as a way to stabilize or keep up against some early swarmy boards. We've also got Death Knights coming with a bunch of Reborn minions potentially, so 1 damage becomes really meaningful, perhaps in a Death Knight Reborn sort of meta. So across those two things, yeah, some kind of control deck, some kind of combo deck, some kind of Fell deck is going to find a reason to run Unleash Fell, because this card does do quite a bit for 1 mana. It's rather nice. So moving on to some Druid stuff, catching up on these from a couple days ago. I got caught up in Thanksgiving and decided just not to do the review the night before Thanksgiving. So we're gonna do a new Brakan here, the 8-mana 7/7 legendary for Druid. Kind of a new mechanic here a little bit. He's undead and he has Battlecry gain 8 armor. This turn, your minions cost armor instead of mana. So basically, you're getting 8 extra mana right off the bat when you play a new Brakan, and that means he's kind of free. So you just kick off the turn with a free 7/7. Okay, that's a nice place to start. And then if you're able to gain additional armor in that given turn that you play a new Brakan, really the sky is sort of the limit. So people have, of course, identified a few opportunities here. Things like Brand Bronzebeard right away can create some silliness, doubling any kind of armor battle cry effects, which we're going to have some here with like Under King, for instance, or even like the quest line for Druid. If you play the big old 8/8 guff that gives you 8 attack and 8 armor, you can start doing some real shenanigans with Anubricon. And the more armor you have, the more crazy it can get, of course. So getting like a Denathrius in there, not that absurd, actually. So I think there are kind of two ways this could be utilized. Number one is just creating a really, really big swing fairly early in the game. Of course, Druid's ramping to 8 mana earlier than most. They just plop a 7/7 and a few extra minions, and they just absolutely counter pressure aggro decks to death. You know, if they don't have a way to deal with all these bodies, the game is just going to end, especially if there's like a few taunts or a little additional life gain left over at the end of it all. Number two, this could be like a combo enabler where you're just setting up some combo turn where you are playing a Brand and there's an Athreus and all these crazy things, looking to ensure an OTK off the back of all this mana cheat that Anubricon provides. And I actually think both of those will probably be viable in some way or another in Druid. Anubricon just creates so many opportunities that he's pretty scary. And the cool thing is that a lot of the support cards we're going to see in this video, a lot of them are kind of self-sufficient. They don't really have to have Anubricon to set them up. Sometimes what can happen is if your whole thing is built around a single card like Anubricon, you might just throw games when he's at the bottom of your deck, but you're not really sacrificing or risking a lot, I don't think, with this package in order to enable your Anubricon turn. So even when you do whiff on the Anubricon, if he's not there, you can't find him, you're probably still going to be getting by okay with the rest of these cards. So all in all, that makes this a really scary package, and Anubricon a real build around scary potential sort of card, which Druid has a great history with. This card's probably going to be really, really good. So next up here, let's talk about the Crypt Keeper. This is an 8 mana 4/6 undead with taunt, and he's going to cost 1 less for each armor that you have. So of course, this right away off of an Anubricon turn can instantly start dumping that board like we talked about, that just onboard swing, that counter pressure swing that's often enough to win games. Crypt Keeper is going to be amazing there, but also with a lot of these other armor gain cards we're seeing, this is a great way to restore a little bit of the onboard tempo you're sacrificing if you're playing for armor gain instead. So this just says, okay, I'm getting hit by some bodies on board, I need to start setting up for my late game. I'm going to just get a little armor, play the Crypt Keeper. That's going to help me stabilize, make sure I get to my power turns later in the game. Any of these cost reduction cards like this for Druid have historically worked fairly well. Now, this one is a little bit less inevitable than some of the other ones, you know, like play a big spell or, you know, play enough cards just naturally. This one does have a specific approach with armor. So, you know, he's not going to exist outside of decks that gain armor. He's not going to fit in every single sort of Druid deck, but I think in decks that have this armor gain package or any sort of armor gain at all that's reliable, Crypt Keeper just makes a lot of sense. So next up here we have Under King, a 7 mana 6/6 undead. He's got Rush and he's got Battle Cry and Death Rattle, gain 6 armor. So of course, if you're looking in an Anubricon world, you could play Anubricon. This guy's going to be effectively free, just costing you your 7 armor. And then, you know, if you have stuff to trade him into in particular, he could net you 12 armor, which means you have another 12 mana to work with for minions, which, again, this can help create these just absolutely bonkers swing sort of turns. Even if he doesn't die, even if he just value trades on board, he basically pays for himself because he's going to give you that 6 armor on Battle Cry. If you weave in any kind of brand stuff like we talked about, right, just forget it. The sky is essentially the limit. You have infinite mana with all these cards playing together. Not literally, but it might feel like that sometimes. Certainly infinite enough to win the game with big swings like this. Because this, again, is a little bit self-sufficient, right? Sometimes this card will feel okay with when you're playing Druid, you're ramping up to 7 mana fairly quickly. You're just playing this guy, you're trading into your opponent's stuff. He's giving you that life gain. He's giving you that time to move into your late game plays, even if he's not comboing, even if he's not doing anything crazy. He's just helping you keep up on board while giving you, you know, 12 health total over the course of his lifespan. So that's pretty nice. I think that's going to work really well for these decks, both in the key moments, but also in the moments leading up to the key moments, just kind of setting you up nicely. So next up here is Chitinous Plating. This is on the spell side of things for this armor package. Now, do keep in mind for Anubricon specifically, he says your minions cost armor instead of mana. So you aren't going to be able to play things like Chitinous Plating using armor to like create these crazy intervades. There are minion ways to gain armor, as we've talked about, but this one is not going to work that way. But this has a cool mechanic built in because this reads gain 4 armor, and then it reads at the start of your next turn, gain 4 more. So what you can do is actually play this the turn before a Nubricon, and it's guaranteeing you that you're going to have that armor at the start of the turn, assuming that you survive, of course, which means you kind of have that 4 extra mana to work with going into your Nubricon turn. Or if you played 2 of these, of course, you could have 8 extra mana to work with, setting up a lot more of that crazy combo potential, or those really, really crazy powerful swings for a Nubricon. Now, chitinous plating as an 8 armor gain card in general, I don't think this is going to be great on its own. I think you're probably only going to use this if you have some of these really nice armor follow-up cards. In other words, you know, that's just not the most efficient heal or the best way for Druid often to be spending their cards or mana. So I do think this is a really solid enabler for this armor and Nubricon stuff, but probably not a card that exists too well outside of that home. So finally here we have Beetlemancy, a new 5-mana spell. Choose one, gain 12 armor, or summon 2 3/3 beetles with taunt. Now, 2 3/3 beetles with taunt, not very exciting for 5 mana. That's just not going to feel like a great play, I think, almost ever, outside of some crazy desperation. Choose one, gain 12 armor. Also, I don't think feels very good. That's just not very efficient, spending 5 mana just to gain 12 armor. Even in this armor package world, it's going to be really hard to set that up. I mean, there could be scenarios where it's like, okay, my opponent doesn't really have a lot on board. If I gain this armor now, like, you know, I'll keep most of it into my Nubricon turn. That's a possibility, but there's going to be so many matchups where that doesn't work, where they have, you know, a few 3/3s on board, and you play Beetlemancy, and you basically spent 5 mana to, like, maybe heal 3, and probably not even that because they equip a weapon and hit you or whatever, right? There would be better ways to save more life or more armor with 5 mana if you were just reacting to your opponent's board or playing stuff that actually gets on board and starts to contest the game. So it's like, yeah, technically this might net you some armor from time to time, but aren't there going to be better things to do? Just more efficient plays? Wouldn't you rather just ramp anyway? Those sorts of questions really come to mind for Beetlemancy, because this card just doesn't look very efficient in either fashion. I think, you know, if you're in some kind of world where you're combining choose one effects, if that sort of thing came back later or came into vogue for Druid again, like, yeah, okay, then we're talking a little more. 2 3/3 beetles and 12 armor. Okay, that's starting to make sense for me, but that's not really a playstyle we're seeing right now. And even then, I suspect there will be better choose one combinations than Beetlemancy specifically. So ultimately, this card just looks pretty dang inefficient and just doesn't get me excited, even in an armor world. Potion Master Putricide is a 4-star card. Concoctor is a 4-star card. Ghoulish Alchemist is a 4-star card. Vile Apothecary is a 3-star card. Potion Belt is a 4-star card. Brutal Annihilant is a 3-star card. Unleash Fell is a 4-star card. Anubricon is a 5-star card. Chitinous Plating is a 3-star card. Underking is a 4-star card. Beetlemancy is a 2-star card. Crypt Keeper is a 4-star card. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for this review. I think we've only got 2 more reviews planned. One super early in the morning or late tonight, depending on where you're at in the world. But then one more tomorrow, and that's it. I think 14 reviews is all we're going to get. So can't believe we're almost done with all these card reveals. Absolutely crazy. The expansion actually almost here. There's also a duels reveal coming. I will be revealing some duels cards on the 27th, so stay tuned for some duels reveal stuff also this weekend. But yeah, man, what do you think about these cards? Is this good stuff, bad stuff? You like it, you hate it? Share all those thoughts and more in the comments below. But until then, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, game on.